So, where should I begin? My mom was a wonderful mom. She provided for us. She was very motherly. My dad worked all the time, so she was a stay-at-home mom. Took care of us, took me to cheer practice. I mean, she did everything a typical mom did. Ever since Biden got elected, that's when everything went downhill. She started secluding herself to her bed and the couch. Started digging deeper into conspiracy theories, and anything she saw, it just led to something else until it started putting a strain on the family. And then she officially left, and she's been gone for almost 7 months. She started on Facebook. It led to a Telegram app, and that's where she got herself into a cult group based in Dallas. It was the Remnant Room. She thought she found her new family, and then she started going to all the Trump rallies because she said she was special. She went to every single one of them with that cult group. These people have filled her head with a bunch of conspiracy theories. The Telegram app has all these individual chat rooms. The main guy involved is Stephen William Tenner and Michael Protzman. And they have a van which travels all over the country, and it is called the Scooby-Doo van. They call it the Scooby-Doo crew, and they're trying to investigate the conspiracy theories inside of the government and how the government is pretty much brainwashing people. They're tearing families apart. They're ruining families. And majority of these cult groups are all women. And they're not being controlled in a way that we think they're being controlled, but it's all through the phone.
Filter bubbles are when you get to the point where you're just being fed certain types of content on social media, and it becomes all encompassing, and it feels like that's your entire world on social, or you get the idea of that's what everyone's talking about because it's all you're seeing on social. So it might actually be a case where you're caught in a small cluster of users who are all posting the same exact thing, but because it's all you're seeing, you tend to think that that's what everyone is thinking because it's being reinforced on your different social profiles. So it works differently on the different platforms, but in general, a filter bubble is you not being exposed to different ideas and different types of content on social.
So I think our patterns of communication have changed a lot because now we enter interactions with a lot more information. We know just by human nature that we look for similarities with people when we communicate. And so sometimes that additional information can pose a challenge.
We believe because how many followers you have on Twitter, that is seen as a metric of influence. And so people are always chasing likes and subscribers. And so we know the crazier you are, the more something's going to resonate. Social media is driving this because you're having people chasing those clicks. And there's a lot of newspapers or news that follow this. If it bleeds, it leads. That saying is applicable in some form or fashion in social media. And like if it's wild and crazy, it's going to get likes and shares.
I do think people are defining themselves and labeling themselves based on what they're exposed to on social media. We have a natural tendency as humans to want to belong to something. We're, collective people. And so I think social media can just fuels that need, that natural instinctual desire that we have to feel a part of something and to feel like we belong, to feel like we have a group. And so I do think that drives some of that behavior and some of that, just that general phenomenon. There's also algorithms that play a big role, I think, in creating those labels and helping us define who we are. Once the platform that you're using recognizes kind of what you're into, what things you like, what things you're searching for, it understands your behavior and it feeds you more of that content. And so that can certainly reinforce some of those natural tendencies that we have to want to belong. The more you're exposed to something generally, the more you like it. And so just that reinforcing behavior of the algorithm can drive some of that belongingness and that labeling, self-labeling, self-identifying that people are doing.
We've seen a lot of negative ramifications with filter bubbles, particularly around some really serious topics: misinformation, conspiracy theories, body image, disordered eating, depression and grief, right? When you get stuck into those bubbles and that's all you're seeing, it's going to play effects on your mind. Misinformation, the more you see it, you start to believe it. There is something to be said about the old adage of you know, seeing is believing. And when you're continually seeing something, even if you were initially skeptical, you start to believe it the more you see it.
Not just my generation, but my parents' generation. If it was printed, people think it was, oh, it must be the truth, right? Because it was in the newspaper. And that's not necessarily the case.
People who are creating disinformation have gotten a lot better at it. And it's really hard sometimes to tell what's real from what's not real, because the content all looks exactly the same and it's said with authority. And oftentimes someone can sit there and lie right to your face, but if it's said with authority and they're a believable person, you're going to believe them.
Our adversaries are using social media tools and weaponizing them against us. We've, the examples of what the Russians have done in our elections, but also stoking the flames of racial hatred is pretty extensive. The anti-Semitism that we're seeing happening in social media is disgusting. So there's a lot of work to be done.
One, misinformation and disinformation are global. It's not just here in the United States. And two, a lot of the bad actors who are creating this and confusing Americans are not from here. They're simply doing it to monetize it, sell ads, and make money off of it. So I think we tend to automatically assume that everything is political in nature, where it might be political in topic, but the people who are creating it could not care less about whether so-and-so wins or so-and-so wins. They just want clicks on their site to be able to sell ads. And so when you start throwing in that monetary motivation behind it as well, that's scary, because now it's not just a political extremism issue, it's now a global economic issue where people are not creating it for political reasons. They're creating it to make money off of it, off of creating chaos in a lot of ways. So that just expands the problem and makes it even worse and makes it harder to solve.
People can educate themselves by just following more diverse perspectives and just different people that are different than you on social media. We're attracted to people that are like us, and so we follow people that are like us on social media. But if you can follow people that might have differing opinions than you, or someone that presents different perspectives, that can be really helpful just to get just different content. And just be self-reflective about where your opinions are coming from, I think, is a good just rule of thumb. And just be self-reflective about kind of why you think the things you think, and understand what's playing a role in that.
I always say we need to model the behavior that we want to see. If we're frustrated with our elected officials, are we behaving in the same way that they are? Or are we encouraging the kind of behavior that we would like to see? If you're a Republican and you like something that a Democrat said and thought it was very thoughtful, have you shared that, commented on that, like that? And vice versa for Democrats against Republicans. So if we don't encourage the kinds of behavior that we want to see from our elected officials, then we're not going to see that kind of behavior. So part of this is we got to look at ourselves about what we share and what we click on and what we promote.
I think more and more people now know the word algorithm, but I don't necessarily know that people truly understand what algorithms do. I think algorithms just become this kind of boogeyman type word where people use it when they're unhappy with something that's going on in social media. I do think in general we're a little bit smarter when it comes to social these days, and understanding that the platforms are not just showing us every piece of content. They're trying to decide through machine learning what to show us and when to show it to us and who to show it from. Unfortunately, though, the signals that we send is what are affecting what we see. And I don't know that people truly understand that. I mean, when you, it doesn't matter which side of the misinformation spectrum you're on, if you are, susceptible to it and you go in and start asking questions in the comments, that's only going to make more of that show up in your feed. And on the flip side of that, if you're going in to try and correct people or dispute things, going in and leaving comments is going to cause more of that to show up in your feed. So it's this kind of perverse irony that oftentimes people who are going in to dispute misinformation end up seeing more misinformation in their feeds, because especially on Facebook and Instagram to an extent, comments are what drives the algorithm in terms of showing us what it shows.
I think people can educate themselves with understanding that algorithms do play a role in what you're seeing on social media. If you're searching political views, like, it's not going to be a coincidence that you might receive ads or suggested content along those lines. So I think just recognizing that the algorithms do play a role in what you're seeing online can be a powerful tool for just educating yourself on what you're seeing and knowing that that's playing a role.
We tend to believe what we want to believe. So if the misinformation is feeding your sense of ego and hubris of what you believe to be true, of course you're going to believe it. I mean, that's kind of human nature. It's why misinformation thrives on social.
The debate around the First Amendment. First Amendment is to prevent the government from taking away your right to speak and criticize the government and to assemble. And so this First Amendment is around government control. So this is one of those things where it's tricky, because I don't know if government intervention is going to make things better rather than make things worse. I think what the government can also do is we can start educating people about fact versus fiction.
I think the true shift has been that we all now have these channels to express ourselves on, which on one hand is good, right? Like, we're a country that believes in free speech and all of those things. But on the other hand, when a decent sized chunk of that is causing harm, that's when it becomes the problem.
Concentrating power in the hands of the few is never a good thing, but also businesses need to be clear about what their rules are and make it up front that these are the rules of the road.
I don't know how we solve it, and I don't know if we ever will solve it. The platforms can't solve it, even though they're the ones who kind of open the box, right? The users have no interest in solving it, or at least the users who need to be the ones to fact check and make sure that what they're sharing is accurate. They generally don't care. That's what a lot of the research shows is, I just want to share it anyways, and so if you don't have those two things, neither of those are going to work. You're stuck with the folks in the middle who care and are being affected by it just from watching the world burn, right? But we can only do so much from that angle and that perspective. And so I honestly, I watch a lot of stuff, I read a lot of stuff on how to fight misinformation, and it's always very small changes that might stop you personally from seeing some of it, but it's never going to stem the larger problem that comes along with it. And it's quite frankly, it's pretty scary.
It's just technology. If this wasn't here, my mom would still be here.